Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dream Show. I'm your host Manuj Aggarwal, and today we'll be talking with Dr. Gary Sanchez. Dr. Sanchez is the founder of the Why Institute, international speaker, and a podcast host to an audience of 1.2 million people. His company has helped over 30,000 individuals and over 500 companies find their why. He has helped everyone from a single entrepreneur to a multi-billion dollar Fortune 500 publicly traded company finding their why and reap the benefits of positioning their companies through their why. Dr. Sanchez is passionate about sharing experiences and impacting thousands in form of creating a community of people. Welcome, Dr. Sanchez.
Manuj, thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
I'm sure. So you've had a very interesting journey. Can we just get to know you a little bit before we dive into what you do now and how you help people? Can you tell us how you got started, what your life journey is all about?
For sure. So I'm in Albuquerque right now, and I went to University of Colorado in Boulder for undergraduate. Then I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I decided I'm just going to try dentistry. I went off to dental school at USC in Los Angeles. Graduated in 1988. And when I got out, the advice that I was given, Manuj, was if you build a great product, people will come, right? So I'm sure lots of your listeners are going to have heard that same thing, right? Just go out and do the best job you can do. People will naturally find out about you, and they'll mysteriously start coming to you because of such a great job that you did. Mm-hmm. And so I took that to heart. I spent 20 years going to the best institutes I could go to, hiring the best mentors, building a beautiful facility, having a very well-trained team. But I can tell you that just having a great product was not enough. And my practice wasn't expanding and wasn't growing. I had a very refined practice, but people weren't talking about me, right? I noticed that people didn't want to talk about their teeth. They didn't want to go to a party and say, hey, look at the new crowns I got from Dr. Sanchez. They wanted people to say, Manuj, you got a great smile, and them say, oh, thank you, right? And that's as far as it went. And so that's about as far as it went.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I became very disillusioned with the whole idea of dentistry. You know, I remember sitting here listening. I'm in my dental practice right now, as I'm also a dentist. And I remember listening, and it was quiet. It was silent because I didn't have any patients. I remember just like tasting that anxiety of like, what am I going to do now? I have gone all in on just trying to be good at what I do, but it's not enough to bring people to me in the way that I thought it would. And that's when I heard about that concept of why with Simon Sinek, right? Simon wrote the book Start With Why, and he developed the why, how, what golden circle concept. And I read it and I watched his TED talk, 30 times. And I was like, man, that is what I'm missing. I know what I do, but I don't know why I do it. Yeah. And I bought into that concept, like I'm sure a lot of your listeners have. And I was like, I'm in. I'm going to go do that. But the only problem was I didn't know my why. Yeah. Right. How useful is that concept when you don't know your why? And so I became obsessed with that. And so I actually called Simon. I said, Simon, I need you to help me discover my why. He said, I don't really know how to do it, but we spent some time together. We spent about 8 months together going back through my life, trying to figure out why I do what I do. And I finally figured out that my why is to find a better way and then share it. Find a better way and then share it, right? So I'm always in search of a better way. And I've got lots of patents and products and inventions that are all better ways of doing things. Yeah. And so I took what I learned from Simon, and I took what I learned from some of my mentors, and I created this whyification process for my practice, applied it to my practice, and my practice took off. And we went from barely getting by to having abundance, right? 4 to 6 new patients a month to 35 to 45 new patients a month. Wow. Practice took off, started getting calls from other dentists wanting me to help them do what I did. So then I had to develop the processes and systems for doing that. And then I started getting calls from chiropractors and lawyers, and businesses kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now I've done it, like you said, with over 500 companies, helping them get clear on who are you, how do you articulate your message, and how do you attract the right people to you, all based on your why. Yeah. But Manuj, the most important thing that I discovered as I was working with more and more people, I had to help them discover their why. And so I instead of taking 6 or 8 or 10 months that it took with Simon, I figured out a way to sit down with somebody, and in about an hour, I could ask them a lot of questions, help them discover their why, and then use that. But I did it so many times that I started to notice patterns and trends and similarities. And I figured out that there's only 9 different whys. 9 different whys. That's the most important thing I discovered, because then I was able to write a software program where you can go online now and discover your why in about 4 or 5 minutes. And it's way more accurate than I am. And I've done more why discoveries than anybody in the world.
Wow.
And it's more accurate than I am. So that was the 2 or 3 minute version, probably 4 minutes, to kind of get us up to speed.
That's amazing. Now, a lot of people know who Simon Sinek is. They understand the concept of why, but a lot of them may be uninitiated. So for them, can we dive a little bit deeper and understand what is this concept of why?
Yeah, great question. So what Simon talks about is, he says that inspiring people like Martin Luther King and Steve Jobs, inspiring companies like Apple, Southwest Airlines, Harley Davidson, they all communicate the same way. And it's the opposite to the way that the rest of us communicate, where we tell people what we do, they tell people why they do what they do. And so the reason that that's so important is the way that it connects to your brain. And so I want to talk real quickly about 2 parts of the brain, right? So there's the outer part. So imagine your brain is like 2 circles, a big circle on the outside and a small circle in the middle.
Sure.
The outer circle would be like it's called the neocortex, and the inner circle is called the limbic brain. Right. So the neocortex can understand lots of rational and analytical thought and language. And what that means is it can understand lots of data, facts, figures, features. Right. So when you tell people all the facts, figures, and features of your business or your service or your product, they'll look at you and they'll say, yeah, Manuj, I understand what you're saying, but let me think about it. Right. Have you ever heard that before?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, when you connect to the neocortex doesn't make decisions. No decision making happens there. Decision making happens in the inner part of the brain, or the limbic brain. So the limbic brain is responsible for feelings like loyalty and trust, and that's where decision making happens. So when you connect to somebody at the level of the limbic brain, it feels right. They make a decision because it feels right. And then they justify it with the neocortex, or the outer part of the brain. So let me give you an example. Have you ever bought anything that you didn't need?
Oh, yeah. Let's not go there.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure your listeners are going to say the same thing. Of course I have. So why did you buy it, right? You bought it because it felt right. That feels great. I think I'm going to buy that. I want that. So you buy things because they feel right. And then after you've bought it, you justify it with all the facts, figures, and features that make you feel better about that. And so, like, for example, recently I just bought this truck, big truck, this big blue Raptor truck. I don't need a truck. I'll probably never put anything in the back of the darn thing, but I don't even want to get it scratched or dirty.
Yeah.
But I bought it because I was trying to figure out what I want to get. And I get in it and I'm driving around. I said, boy, this thing feels great. I love this. So I bought it. And now I'm rationalizing the heck out of it with the neocortex, saying, yeah, it gets as good a gas mileage as my last one. I can run over Miatas. I can take it to the lake. I can take it skiing. I have lots of rational thinking about it. So the reason I'm telling you that is, when you start with your why, you connect to the limbic brain. And when you start with your what, you connect to the neocortex. So when you tell people what you do, you blend in with everybody else who does what you do. I'm a dentist. Oh, okay. Well, what comes to mind when you hear I'm a dentist, right? I hate dentists, or I don't want to go to the dentist, or, dentists have the highest suicide rate, or whatever comes to your mind. But then it doesn't drive behavior. It doesn't make you help you to make a decision that, I want to work with you. So when you talk about what you do, you blend in with everybody else who does what you do. When you talk about why you do that, you connect to the limbic brain, which is the decision-making part of the brain that allows people to raise their hand and say, yeah, I believe the same thing. See, how you talk about your why is by talking about what you believe versus what you do.
Sure.
And it allows people to say, yeah, I believe the same thing. So let's use you as an example. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I know your why, and your why is to challenge the status quo and to think differently. So those of you that have been listening to Manuj for a long time know that he doesn't do things the same as everybody else. He thinks outside the box. He imagines extraordinary. And from his past, where he came from to where he is an amazing story, right? It takes a lot of different type of thinking to get where you are right now from where you started, right?
Yeah. I was just getting in more trouble, but yeah. So yeah.
So if they said to you, Manuj, what do you do? And you said, well, I'm a coach, or I'm a business leader, or I'm a business coach, or what would you say if somebody says, what do you do at a party? What would you say?
Well, I help people just design their life exactly how they want it to be.
So what is that? Is that a business coach, or what business category would that be in?
And this is where I struggle with putting a label on it, because I help people with their life problems, with their business problems, with any of that, like because it's a continuum. The way that I look at life is a business, and life is a continuum. So whatever you want is part of three things, like either health, love, or money. So a combination of thereof, and I help them get there.
Okay, so if you were at a party and somebody says, so what do you do? You might say something like, I'm a business and life coach.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you got 2 seconds to tell them, I'm a business and life coach.
Yeah.
Right. But tell me what it is that you believe. What do you believe about where people are at? And I can help you with this because I know your story and I know your business, but I know that you believe that people inherently put themselves in a box.
Yeah.
Inherently undervalue what they're capable of doing.
That's right.
Inherently, they get stuck, right? They're stuck in this box, and you're there to get them outside of that, to think differently, to imagine extraordinary, to create things they never thought they could, right?
Exactly.
And so if you said something to me like, I believe that when people get outside their box that they put themselves in, they can create amazing and extraordinary things.
For sure.
Well, then we're having a different conversation than if you said to me, I'm a life and business coach.
Yeah, that's true.
You see? So now it would be like, I believe that too. Tell me more. Tell me more about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it allows me to connect to you in a way that's totally different. So back to my dental story, I could say to you, yes, I'm a dentist. Or you ask me what I do, and I say I'm a dentist. You know, whatever comes through your mind, you're like, okay, so what? I'm out of here. Or, but if I said to you, I believe that when you have your health, you have 1,000 dreams. And when you don't, you have one.
Yeah.
And now we'd have a completely different conversation when it relates to the health of your teeth and the health of your body and the health of your smile. That's a completely different conversation, right?
Very true. That's a very deep way of looking at things. And thanks a lot for going into the details there. Now, I mean, it almost sounds like a superpower, and it's like you could actually do a lot of good, a lot of bad with this. But help us understand how you were able to distill it down to an algorithm which a software can actually, like, it's such a powerful thing, and to be able to get to that conclusion in a few minutes, it sounds like amazing, like almost impossible. So how did you get to all that?
Oh, great question. So like I mentioned, I used to sit down with people and I would ask them a series of questions. In fact, here's the question. The first question I would ask them is I would say, Manuj, tell me a story about an interaction you had with somebody at work that made you feel successful. And so you'd think for a minute and you say, okay, well, let me tell you what happened. And you tell me this story. And I'd listen to that story. And then after you were done, I'd say, okay, now tell me a story about an interaction you had with somebody outside of work that made you feel successful. And you would tell me pretty much the exact same story, but with different people in it. And I would look for this, right? And I would look for this pattern And then that pattern is what your why is. It's where you have found success over and over and over in your life.
Yeah.
And that's how I would figure out your why. And I would do this. I became obsessed with helping people discover their why. If you were my patient, my poor patients, of course they can't, when they're sitting in my chair, they were going to get their why discovered.
Oh.
And if you were sitting next to me on an airplane, you were going to get your why discovered. Nice. And so if you met me out at a restaurant or something, you're going to get your why discovered. And I did this so many times. I did it on stages, on Skype. I'd pull somebody out of the audience, bring them up on stage with me and help them discover their why. And I did this so often that I started to notice the same things being said over and over and over. And that's where I started keeping track of them. And I found that there was only 9 different whys. And then once I did that, I could teach people how to do it the way I did it. Oh. But what became even more valuable was when I started to think about I used to think I had to be the one to do it. Yeah, I have to be the one to talk to you. Mm-hmm. I have to interpret what you're saying. I have to physically be there and look at your face and look at your reactions and look at what's going on and intently listen to every word that you use in order to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that was correct in order to find the 9 whys. Yeah. But once I found the 9 whys, I found a completely different way to get there. So it would be like creating a masterpiece painting. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It takes so much emotion and connection to what you're doing to create that. Yeah. And once it's created, then you can figure out how to do the exact same thing with paint by numbers. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so that's what I did is I figured out how to paint by numbers to get there without having to go through all the stories. And it's so much more accurate than I am. Because it relies on what you would say versus the stories that you tell.
Amazing. So it sounds like, that concept of 10,000 hours. If you keep doing it over and over again, you get so good at it that you can basically just wrap it up in an algorithm and have the computer do it. So amazing.
Yeah. However, I can't look at somebody in most cases and know what their why is. If somebody's walking down the street, unless they're just dressed way outside the box and they got pink hair and they got, whatever, I can kind of guess there. Mm. But in general, I really can't look at somebody and just say, okay, I know your why. Yeah. And I try that, and I speak at big events around the country. What I do is I put pictures of famous people up on the screen and I have the audience guess at what they think their why is, once I've taught them the 9 whys, and it's all over the board.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, maybe someday we'll get there. I know for a fact computing power is increasing and a lot of new concepts are coming out. So maybe in a few years.
Yeah.
Let me ask another interesting question here is that I understand the way you described how the brain works and, how we can connect with the other humans at a deeper level. How does that extrapolate to a corporation? How does that, a company doesn't have a brain. So tell us how you extended this concept to a company.
Yeah, great question. Successful organizations only have one why, and that's the why of the visionary or the founder. So let me give you an example. Steve Jobs, everybody knows him. Yeah. Steve Jobs' why is the same as yours, by the way, which is to challenge the status quo and think differently, to think outside the box. Okay. Now, how he goes about doing that is by finding better ways to do things, right? And then what he ultimately brings is a simple solution so that everybody can use it and do it and work with it. But that's how he is in his personal life as well. Yeah. Right. So that's who he is at his core. That's his why, how, and what. But that also is the why, how, and what of Apple.
I see.
So what is Apple's tagline, right? Think different.
Yeah.
Where do you think that came from?
Yeah, from him.
From Steve Jobs. Your company is the same thing. Your company is a reflection of you. So the better able you are to articulate why you do what you do, the more you will attract those people that believe what you believe.
Got it. Got it.
Right. And so if you talk about getting people outside their box, if you talk about imagining extraordinary, thinking about yourself differently,
Yeah.
understanding yourself and what at a different level,
Mm-hmm.
people who are looking to think differently
Uh,
would resonate with that. And those would be your clients. Those would be the people that work for you. That's how you develop your culture. That's how you develop your brand. So here's the really important thing.
yeah.
Knowing your why is the essential first step.
Yes.
And I know you're all about creating steps to success,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? You're a systems process guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first step every time has to be discovering your why, because everything else comes from that. And so there's a lot of really great assessments out there.
Yeah.
You know, there's DISC, there's Myers-Briggs, there's Colby, there's Strength Finders, there's on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of them, and they are awesome tools, every one of them.
Yeah.
But they're not your why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your why is the essential first step, and then those others will all fall into place when you start from the perspective of your why. You're not going to build your brand on your Myers-Briggs or your colors or your DISC or your any of those, but you better build it based on your why.
Yeah.
Because that's when it's real, and that's when it's authentic, and that's when it's true, when it comes from your why.
Amazing.
Does that make sense?
Of course. Of course. Thank you so much. That makes perfect sense. Now, I want to still keep going deeper into this, because the example you used was perfect. Like, Steve Jobs, he started the company, then he left. I mean, he was forced out of Apple, and then they started going downhill, and then he came back and sort of, restructured the whole company. Now it's a very successful company. But here is another question that comes up. Now he's not there. So how, when you work with all these companies, some of them, they don't even have a founder anymore, because like it was started 50 years ago, whatever it is. So how do you extract the why when it's a publicly traded company with CEOs going in and out and all these changes happening? How do you stay consistent with that why? How do you even discover that?
Great question. Another great question. So I'll give you an example on a smaller level, and then I'll give you an example on a bigger level. So on a smaller level, there is a law firm here in Albuquerque called the Whitener Law Firm. And they are definitely now, the CEO was, he had your why as well, just by chance. Yeah. I knew him because he's a patient of mine, and he was the first lawyer to really get into using TV to advertise.
Oh,
and so, right. So he was the guy that did all those crazy commercials where there's cars crashing. And he always had this thing, don't accept a check before you check with me. And he'd rip up this check. Right? And so he would do all these crazy commercials, and it was kind of frowned on at first, and then it kind of became the norm. But anyways, he passed away suddenly about 3 or 4 years ago.
I see.
And the new lawyers, there were 2 partners with there. There was 3, but the 2 now became the owners of that law firm. And I went to work with them. And so this was the question. Do you want to keep alive the why of the founder, or do you want to take it in the direction of the new leader?
Oh, I see.
And so they elected to keep alive the why of the founder.
I see.
Russ Whitener. They didn't even change the name. They didn't even let anybody know he died.
Oh, wow.
They still use the same phone number. I mean, that had his name in it. It's still called the exact same thing, the Whitener Law Firm. And so they that was their choice to keep alive the why of the founder who passed away. But they could have kept alive. They could have said, no, it's now my law firm. This is the direction that we're going to go, and it's all a reflection of me. So the message would change, the culture would change, the marketing would change based on the new leader. So it's the why. Organizations only have one why, and that's the why of the founder or the current leader.
I see.
So here's another question that might come up. What if there's two leaders or three leaders.
Yeah.
Well, you can't have two leaders, right? You can only have one person steering the boat. Does that mean that the other person is not just as important? No, they're very important, but there's only one visionary. You can only have one person creating determining where we're going, right?
Yeah.
So how you figure that out is, where does the buck ultimately stop? Yeah. So let's say you had a partner. I would ask you, are you the visionary or is your partner the visionary?
I mean, in most cases, I'm the visionary because I can't organize other things at all.
So then you would be the one that we would use your why to determine the why, how, and what of your organization and your brand and your message, and all that would come from you.
Great.
And he or she could be the how you do that, but not the why.
Great. All right. So that was beautifully answered, and now I understand the concept. Now, another thing what I realize is a lot of people may understand their why, but their why may not be as glorious, may not be as sexy, it could be, it could have a lot of negative feelings around it, like shame or guilt or what have you. How do you take that kind of realization or that kind of why and amplify it? Because you need to be able to do something with it. As I said, what is the next step once you figure out why? Like, what are your views about that?
Okay, so first of all, I want to get, you said something important there. And that was that we want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing.
Sure.
So you hear a lot of gurus talking about this concept of why. In fact, every guru and every book and every consultant and every coach and every creative talks about the why. And so I'm sure your listeners have heard it before and heard someone tell them, you got to know your why, you got to know your why, you got to know your why. And so I'll be at different events around the country and I'll say, when you know your why, what you do has more impact and it has more meaning, it has more focus. And they'll say, yeah, you know what? I agree with you. In fact, I know my why. And I'll say, oh, hey, that's great. Well, what's your why? And they'll say, oh, well, my why is my family. See, I have my two kids right here and this is my why. Or they'll say, they'll have a picture of a little red dress on their phone. And they'll say, this is my why right here. I need to get into this dress in 6 months for a wedding that's coming up. And that's why I'm working out the way I'm working out. And that's a completely different type of why. What they're talking about is a short-term motivation for doing things the way they're doing it.
Got it. Okay.
As their why. But what I'm talking about is, why do you do what you do everywhere you go, irrespective of the circumstances?
Got it.
Right? You bring an outside the box solution or thinking everywhere you go. Doesn't have to do with just your family.
Yeah.
I'm not saying your family isn't part of your why, but it's not the why that I'm talking about. Your family is your motivation for doing things the way you're doing them.
Got it.
Because I want it all to revolve around me spending time and knowing my family and being in their lives.
Sure.
But if you didn't have your family, does that mean you would still do it that way? No, you wouldn't. So what I'm talking about is, why do you do what you do everywhere you are, everywhere you go? What is that gift that you bring? What is that thing I can count on? Why would I choose you to be my business and life coach? Even though that may not be what you want to call it, but why would I choose you? It's not because of your family. I'm not choosing you to work with me because of your family.
Yes.
I'm choosing you because of that gift that you have, which is to get me outside my box and help me think differently. So all of the 9 whys are positive. They're all great things. They're all needed. There's not one that's more important than the other. They're just the way it is. So I believe that you have a gift inside you. I believe you already have something special inside you. You just need to know what it is so that you can use it to get on the right path. Does that make sense?
Of course. It does. And I thanks for clarifying that, because that sort of separated, as you said, the motivation versus the why. But the
Yes.
question I still want to not let you off the hook,
Yeah.
where I want to understand, once you understand that why,
Mm.
how do you amplify that message? Like, what is that marketing step, or branding, like how does that interpret into your branding, your logo, your message, because that will be the next step, I'm guessing, in sharing your why, or aligning your messaging with your why, isn't it?
Yeah. So, okay. Once you know your why, then the next step is you need to know your how and your what.
Okay. Okay.
So step one is discover is no. So let me go through the three big strategies. This will answer for you.
Yeah.
The three big strategies that we use when we're working with organizations, businesses, organizations, even people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first big strategy is, which I told you already, your why is the essential first step. You
Yeah.
have to know your why before you build your brand, your marketing, your messaging, your culture, get on the right career path. You have to know your why first. The second one is you have to apply your why in the right sequence. Sequencing is critical. Like if you're going to bake a cake,
Yeah.
or put together some project, there's a sequence that you have to follow if you want to get the right result. So it's the application of information in the right sequence that yields the right result.
Mhm.
The right sequence is why, how, what. It's not how, why, what, or what, how, why. It's why, how, what. And so you need to know your how and your what in order to be able to do that and put it together in the right. This is why I do what I do. This is how I bring that to life. And this is what you can count on from me.
Got it.
So that's the second step. So in my case, my why is to find a better way. Now, how I do that is by making things clear and understandable. And what I ultimately bring is a simple solution so that others can move forward. I do that at the Why Institute. I do that in my dental practice. I do that everywhere I go. Right. So you got to know your why, how, and what. And then the third one is your message matters. What you say matters, and what you don't say matters. So if all you do is talk about your what, then you blend in with everybody else who does what you do. But when you talk about your why, how, and what, that's when it resonates with the right person. So you take your why, how, and what, and turn it into your marketing messaging. So step one, discovering your why. Step two, you're getting your how and your what and developing your personal why, how, and what. Step three is developing your business why, how, and what. And there's a process for doing that. And then the next step is developing all of your messaging that you would use on your website. And that would include your tagline, your we believe statements, your script for your video, your ideal client. All of that is incorporated in developing your message. And it all comes from your why. And what's great about it is it's so much simpler when it comes from your why than trying to go in a closet somewhere and figure out, what am I going to say about myself?
Yeah.
Right? That's how it usually goes. So, you hire this marketing firm and they disappear and you're like, where are they? Oh, and then they'll come back and say, well, this is what you need to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, really? Yeah, this will work. This will work.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't feel that good. No, but it'll work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not what I can't say that. That's not me.
Yeah.
And so when it comes from your why, that's when you know it's real.
Yeah. That's
Does that
great.
make sense?
Of course, of course. Now, after going through all these, thousands and thousands of people and companies, um, what is your take on how many people understand what their why is, like in terms of relative percentage or whatever? Because when we talk to people, do you know yourself? I think 90% people say, oh yeah, I know myself. What is your take on things? What is the reality?
Very, very low. I think a lot of people are good at what they do, but they're not satisfied with it and they don't know their why. And so they're not living their why. And when what you do, here's another really important point. When what you do is in line with why you do what you do, you will have passion for what you do.
Yeah.
And that's where passion comes from. And passion is the fuel that gives you the energy to pursue your dreams. Without passion, you don't have energy. Without energy, you don't have anything.
Yeah.
So you have to live your why in order to have passion. And so many people don't. They're in search of money. They're in search of fame. They're in search of building whatever it is they're trying to build. But when it comes from their why, that's when they'll have passion for what they do. And that's when it'll be so much fun. They'll have unlimited energy. They can do it all day and they can do it all night, and they never run out of energy. And they're in the right lane, so they can move fast. So much happens when you're living your why, right? And I have found it to be very rare versus very many.
I see. So it almost sounds like it's also a path of self-discovery. Like, do you find that people are surprised when they actually find out, like, this is my why? Like, do you see them saying, oh yeah, it's sort of, that's what I expected? Or do you see them saying, oh my God, I didn't even realize that this is who I am?
I would say both, but I would say what the why does, what discovering your why does, is it gives you the words to go with the feelings.
Oh.
People often have a sense of what their why is. They often feel a feeling of what it is, but they don't know how to say it. They don't know how to articulate it. They don't have words to go with the feeling. And so it's just a feeling. And so you don't have confidence in a feeling, because a feeling can change, right? But when you discover your why, they're like, damn, that's it, man. That is exactly why I do what I do. And they walk differently. They speak differently. They talk. It's just, they talk differently because they know. There's a big difference between sensing, thinking, feeling, and knowing. And when they know it, man, now I can do something with it.
Yeah.
Right. If it's not right. And then that's a really important point, because now you can talk about it with confidence. You can talk about your ability to get people to think different, get them to see different, get them to imagine extraordinary, get them outside their box. You have the words to go with what you've been doing for people for so long now, but didn't know exactly how to talk about it. So if you ask most people, they'll say, oh yeah, my why is to help people.
Yeah.
That's
a common one. Yeah.
Yeah. And that might even have been what you would have said, right? Or I would have said, had I not known.
Yeah.
Right. You talk to anybody in a church setting, you talk to anybody in a nonprofit. Oh, yeah, it's to help people. I'm here to help people.
Yeah.
Well, you might be, but let's find out. And then once they discover their why, they're like, you know what, that actually is really why I do what I do. And when I'm doing that, that's when I can help people.
That's great. Amazing. So now, you have had a tremendous success, and you have leveraged this concept for your success, and you've helped other people. Now, I want to demonstrate to people, to the listeners and viewers, that this is not like a fluke that you found success or some other people. So can you share maybe one or two success stories from the people that you work with, either companies or people that you work with, how their life transformed after they went through this process with you?
For sure. So I have a friend here in Albuquerque, and he and his family had a big insurance agency. And it had been in their family for multi-generations, and it was kind of, the biggest one here in Albuquerque. And then I had found out that this friend of mine had left the organization, and he was going to start coaching.
Okay.
And so I ran into him one day at a football game. We were at a tailgate, and I said, "Hey, Jerry, you left your agency and to coach." And he said, "Well," I said, "Well, why did you do that?" And he's like, and he gives me some BS answer. I don't even remember what it was. And I look at him and I said, "I don't think that's it." And I could see that he got kind of annoyed with me, because I guess he'd gotten asked that question a lot. And I was like, I don't think that's why you did it. He goes, "What do you mean?" And he goes, I think if you knew your why, you would know why you left it, but that doesn't really sound like it. He's like, you talking about that Simon Sinek thing? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I don't want to hear that. And I said, okay. I said, but if you ever want to discover your why and then really be able to answer that question, let's talk. And so finally he calls me and he says, yeah, let's do it. And what was kind of funny is it was on Halloween. And the reason I remember it was on Halloween is because at my office here, we dress up for Halloween. And so I was dressed as a tooth fairy. I was a tooth fairy, and we had to go to lunch, and that happened to be the day that we decided to go to lunch. And so he's out with me, and I'm dressed like a tooth fairy, and I'm sitting there at this restaurant helping him discover there's why. And I could tell he was like annoyed by that. But anyway, so I helped him discover his why, which happened to be to find a better way.
I see.
And so as soon as he discovered that, he was like, man, that is exactly what I've been trying to say for years. That is exactly why I do what I do. And I've done my entire life. And now I know. And he said, I need to use this process for my clients and for what I'm doing, because now I'm coaching and now I'm helping businesses. So he's taken that and he has helped businesses, all kinds of different businesses, increase their bottom line by hundreds of thousands, millions, hundreds of millions, and billions.
Wow.
Doing that exact thing, which is let's get clear on you, which helps us get clear on our culture, which helps us perform at a higher level. You know, discovering your why is the essential first step in self-awareness, and self-awareness is the essential first step in peak performance.
Yes. Yes.
So if you want to perform at the highest level, you got to know who you are.
Exactly.
And that first step is knowing your why.
Amazing.
So another quick example, I worked with a venture capital firm in Baltimore, one of the top venture capital firms in the US, and they were struggling with, you know, their branding and what they're all about. And we took them through the process of discovering the why, how, and what of the CEO, and his why happened to be trust, and creating relationships based upon trust. And that's how they viewed what they did. They took their message, we redeveloped their brand, redeveloped their message, redeveloped their tagline, created their presentation deck, all based on their why, how, and what. And that next week, they raised $330 million, which was $100 million more than what they were going to raise. And, you know, they're off and running and they're still killing it. So I could go through story after story after story of the power of clarity, right? The power of knowing who you are, but knowing how to say it. When you can say it, you know it. When you can't say it, you don't know it.
Yeah, true.
It's just a feeling, right? It's just a sense.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's so helpful.
Yeah. So, you know, what I really want to do here is make sure that people understand, you know, you threw out some big numbers, and big numbers sometimes scare people. But the amazing thing is, can you tell us how people, like, they don't have to spend a lot of money to get to what they really need. So can you tell us how you help people, and how much does it cost, and what is the process? Because I think that's very important.
Yeah. So it's very important. So what I've decided to do is keep things very cost effective, because really my goal is to help 1 billion people discover, make decisions, and connect based on their why. And so in order to do that, I can't really make things what it's really cost me to do. But so to discover your why is $47. So, you know, that's a dinner somewhere. And you just go to my website, whyinstitute.com, click on discover your why. You'll be able to take the why discovery. Now there's 1,500 possible question options there, but you're only going to have to answer about 10, because what I did is I used logic-based programming. So when you answer a question, it wipes out all the other ones that you don't have to answer that are not relevant to you. You know, a lot of the assessments you have to answer like 130 or 150 questions. You're like, holy cow, I don't even know how you can make it through this. I don't like that. You know, once you answer all the questions, then they filter it. I wrote the software so that it filters as you go. So the first one gets rid of like 750 of the questions, and the next one gets rid of a few more hundreds and hundreds. So you only have to answer about 10 questions. It'll take you about 4 to 5 minutes. You can do it right on your phone, and you can then discover your why. And what you'll get once you know your why is you'll get a short description, but then you'll get a video from me that details the whole thing, your why. You'll see what percentage of the population has your why. You'll learn the characteristics of your why, the challenges that come with your why, the solutions to the challenges. how your why works in different relationships at business and personal and parenting and career options, and what people would say about you and words and phrases you would say. So there's a lot that you'll get to know yourself with in those 47 minutes, 47 for those $47 in 4 minutes.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And then, if you want to take it to the next step, which is discovering your how and what, that too is very cost effective. All the way along, I'm trying to keep it to where as many people as they want to can have this for their own life.
Awesome. That's amazing that you're doing. I mean, this is tremendous amount of value for kind of results that you shared with us. So can you just repeat it once again? Where do they go? How do they get to this, and how do they take it?
Yeah. So if you go to www.why-WHY-Institute.com, right on the homepage there, you'll see, I need to discover my why, and just click on that button. It'll take you right there.
Amazing.
And so you can discover your why, and highly recommend that you have your spouse or significant other discover it with you. Mm-hmm. And you guys will have a lot to talk about. It's invaluable in understanding your significant other. Why don't they just do things the way I do it?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? I mean, that's not how I would do it.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden you'll have an answer to why they do it the way they do it. And then you guys can laugh about it versus fight about it. Amazing. It's really helpful in relationships.
Well, thank you so much for doing what you're doing and keeping it so cost effective, and bringing all these amazing results. So and spending your time with us explaining. I mean, the thing is, like, I have taken this why, but the way that you described it, now I'm going to have to go back and reread it and look at it from a different point of view. So thank you so much for explaining it in such depth and just sharing your gifts with the world. Thank you so much. We'll put the link to the Why Institute in our show notes so that people can reach out easily. But until then, you can go ahead and discover your why right now. Thank you, Gary, once again. I can't thank you enough for being with us and bringing this amazing software to the world and sharing this with everyone.
Manuj, thank you very much for having me. It's been fun. I've enjoyed talking with you. Of course, I did all the talking in this case, but thanks for having me on.
Thank you.